to coaching at USF with the Bulls. We're now joined by Andy Zimbalist, sports economist and author of numerous books on a lot of things, college and, of course, pro and the economy and what we see now, the economics. Andy, thanks for your time. I know it's hard to get you on a show, and we appreciate you giving us that time. What is your thought process right now of what you see when it comes to college athletics and the media deals and the realignment and the restructuring and all the things that are going on right now?
I think we're at an inflection point, and one of the roads is a road to ruin. Looked at, first of all, from a financial point of view, if you look at the NCAA statistics for the last pre-COVID year, the median program, athletic program in FBS was losing just under $20 million a year. Since that point in time, the situation has gotten much worse, in part because of the pandemic, but that effect will go away. But the other thing that's happening is that the NIL market has exploded. It's not simply these days paying a student athlete to promote a product either on social media or in the newspapers. It's not just that. It's putting together money from boosters to attract people to come to the school. Now, whether you like that or not, from a financial point of view, what it means is that money that used to go from boosters to the athletics department so they can buy seats on the 50-yard line, so donations and also corporate sponsorships that used to go directly to the athletics department, they're now going to the players. Now, again, on moral or ethical grounds, you might think that that's proper, but if you think about it economically, the typical FBS school got $9 million a year from corporate sponsorships, $19 million a year from donations. Good chunks of those monies are not going to the athletic department anymore. So a $20 million deficit, just by that fact alone, can go up to $30 million and more. Then there are lots of other factors that are taking hold. As individual schools see their financial situation getting worse and worse, and of course there are some litigations still outstanding, such as in the Johnson case and the House case, that could declare student athletes to be employees and could declare that they have a right to some of the television money. Again, whether you like that morally or not, that's going to be another financial strain on these departments. And so these departments, almost all of them, with very, very few exceptions in FBS and in Power 5, they're losing increasing amounts of money, and they get desperate. And what do they do when they get desperate? Well, one of the things they do is they look to get into a richer conference. And so you have the reshuffling of chairs happening all over again, musical chairs for the conferences and the schools. And what happens as a consequence of that? Well, in the short run, it looks like schools like UCLA and USC, they're going to get a bigger chunk of a media contract out with the Big Ten. That's good for them. Maybe Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC, that's good for them. But what happens to the Big 12, and what happens to the ACC, and what happens to the Pac-12 when some of their most appealing teams, and it usually is the most appealing teams, to get wooed away by another conference? Well, those conferences, like the Pac-12 and like ACC and like Big 12, they become more impecunious. They have more and more financial issues. The remaining schools then try to realign themselves, maybe joining together the Big 12 and the ACC or whatever the new match might be. But you get a situation of increasing chaos. And if you're ESPN or you're some other media outlet and you're looking at this, what do you notice? You notice that a conference like the Pac-12 had already been going downhill for a variety of reasons, already had been getting lower attendance at the games and lower ratings, and ESPN was losing interest in giving them $31 million a year per team. But then on top of all of that, we see that the USC and UCLA are leaving the Pac-12, and so where does that leave George Kliavkoff, the head of the Pac-12? It's a tremendous mess, and the fundamental raison d'etre, the fundamental characteristic of college sports, whether you like it morally or not, it's being challenged, and the nature of the sport and the way fans relate to it is going to change. And as the financial pressures keep up and this conference realignment keeps on happening, one of the things that schools are going to be tempted to do is to drop the Olympic sports or the non-revenue sports, We happen to have an Olympic system in this country that's totally dependent on athlete development in the colleges, unlike every other country in the world. So basically, it's a big mess. I could go on, but I've talked long enough.
Well, Andy, what is the winning formula economically for them, if such a formula exists?
The winning formula for college sports?
Yes.
Well, I think the winning formula is, first of all, let us recognize that college athletes have been exploited for too long, and it's particularly hit athletes of color, and that needs to be rectified. The way I would rectify it is I provide increasing support for a robust education. Graduation rates are much, much too low amongst athletes in the big-time sports. And I provide medical care, which they're not getting right now. Only 1% of NCAA revenues, 1% goes to supporting medical care for athletes. They should be getting all of their medical care paid when they're in school. They should get coverage for any accident while they're in school going forward. And they should have loss of income insurance bought for them by the programs. I would do all of that and maintain their relationship as students rather than convert them into employees. We can do a lot better for this. Over 98% of college men's basketball and football players never play a single game in the NBA and NFL. Maybe a lot of them want to. Maybe a lot have that dream. But over 98% never play a single game. If we're going to do justice for those students, what we have to do is equip them for the rest of their lives outside of the NBA and the NFL. And that means giving them a good education and protecting their bodies if they get hurt at school.
Andy, do you feel like there is too much? I mean, what do you feel like the destination is for the Big Ten and the SEC eventually? I mean, they're well on their way, as you pointed out. The others are just simply trying to figure out their way and play catch-up as best they can. But do you think that's the pathway the Big Ten and SEC appear to be on right now, sort of going those routes, but also creating something that maybe we haven't quite seen before in quote-unquote college athletics?
I think that's right. The average Major League Baseball team spends over $30 million a year on its minor league system, on developing its minor leaguers. How much does the NFL spend? Zero.
Right.
The NBA spends a little bit, a couple of $1 million maybe on their G League. But basically, the NFL and the NBA get a free ride. And that shouldn't be the way it is. There should be some subsidies going to help support the system. Now, when you start talking about two leagues are going to break off, the SEC and the Big Ten are going to break off, they're each going to have 14 to 16 franchises. Lo and behold, at the end of the day, you're going to have 30 franchises playing college sports that are playing at the very top level. And you could, if you think about them, maybe converting themselves into minor league franchises for the 30 pro teams that there are in the NFL 32. Then some of that financial support that should be flowing back and forth between the NFL and NBA and college sports might start to happen. But the fundamental thing is that the system right now is in complete flux. It's in total flux. Nobody knows where it's going. Everybody's trying to save their little piece of the earth and preserve their benefits, but it's not going to be possible. So, we can sit back and enjoy March Madness this year. We can enjoy particular college competitions. But unless something is done, and I think it has to be done by Congress, because the NCAA is not equipped to do it. And the court system is much too chaotic and much too expensive and much too slow to resolve it. As difficult as it is to get things done productively in the U.S. Congress these days, I'm afraid that's our best bet at this point, to have the Congress impose certain kinds of rules and certain kinds of structures going forward.
Do you think they're going to listen to Matt Baker, or Charlie Baker, excuse me, just because to just make it look like they care? Or do you believe that actually in that House or in the Congress or in that building that they really care about college athletics?
Sure. Yeah. Large numbers of them are big college athletic fans.
Sure.
And they have constituents who are big college athletic fans. And they see that the system is totally chaotic. And they also know that our Olympic system is dependent on our college sports system. So, yeah, I'm working with a group called the Drake Group.
Yep.
And we have been working with members of Congress for the last year and staffs of members of Congress. And I can tell you there's a great deal of interest, and there's a lot smaller political divide between the Republicans and the Democrats on the issue of college sports than there is on practically any other issue. So yeah, I think that they'll find a way to cross over the aisle and make some compromises, and we'll get some legislation. Now, whether it's going to be the legislation we need or not is another question. But perhaps we can get some stopgap measures, and then have a commission take a longer and bigger look at what needs to be done in the long run.
Andy, the media companies have all the power here, yet they're also in their own kind of economic scramble. I mean, ESPN's going to lay off a bunch of people. There have been layoffs across multimedia companies, all for the last couple of years. And a lot of them are, getting into sports or not, but there are some cautionary tales out there, especially recently with Bally Sports and the regional sports nets going bankrupt because the model is changing. What does that mean for anybody who wants to get into this game? And I know Bally Sports might be a little bit more of a unique situation, but even still, what's going on there, and how do the media companies maximize this and distribute to all the people they need to see?
Yeah, well, I think that you're absolutely right to point at a great deal of uncertainty and flux in the sports media space. Bally Sports owns the rights to broadcast, I think it's 15 now, Major League Baseball teams, plus a bunch of basketball teams and hockey teams. And they're going bankrupt. And a large reason for their bankruptcy is that the model has shifted. The model that they've been working off of all these years is the cable model, where everybody in a district that's served, say, by Comcast or by some other distributor, everybody has to buy the sports channels because they're bundled in with the news channels and the movies and so on and so forth. That model is changing. People are cutting the proverbial cord, and there's much more direct-to-consumer marketing. But what that means is that sports teams that used to benefit from the fact that everybody in their television district, and that could be 3 or 4 states together, everybody in the district had to pay for $6 a month to watch the Red Sox, even though they didn't care about the Red Sox. Even though, say, half of them didn't care about the Red Sox, everybody had to pay for it. And now we're in a model that only the people who care about the Red Sox are buying the Red Sox games. There are only people caring about the Yankees buying the Yankee games, and so on. And so that means that the revenue that gets generated in this system is going to go down. That's going to hurt the sports teams. Now, another thing that's happening throughout the media landscape is that younger people, Generation Z people, and many millennials are not interested in spending a couple hours watching a sports game anymore. Now, baseball is making some interesting changes to chop 20 to 25 minutes per game, and that might be marginally helpful. But when you compare the television ratings of people who are 50 and 60 watching baseball to people who are in their teens and in their 20s, it's an unbelievable comparison. Because millennials and Gen Z people just aren't interested in doing that. They have other things they're doing on the internet and other things they're doing in general, not spending time watching television. And what does that do? It reduces the audience, and the sports leagues see that happening, and they're going after sports betting as a way to reattach fans to their sports. Now, how well that works in the long run is very questionable in my mind, and it raises all sorts of additional questions about promoting addictive gambling and social problems that ensue from that.
Andy, if in fact the student athletes in college end up getting more, you'd mentioned the 1%, I think, earlier in the conversation. How do you go about doing that? Have you even looked at the possibility of how that would work? How much more would they get? Would that make it even more difficult for college or universities, whatever, to make money or lose even more money? So how much do you feel like they maybe earn?
How much do I feel like they maybe what?
The college athletes earn on top of whatever they get. How much is it, like an extra certain amount of money per year? Is it a percentage?
So I'm not. I think the way forward here is not to pay them an income, and
okay.
I can elaborate on that some more. But what I'm saying is that if you look at the pot of revenue that's generated in Division I in the NCAA every year, it's about $16 billion. Of that, 35% goes to compensate coaches, assistant coaches, and administrators, 35%. 16% or 17% goes to scholarships for the athletes, and an additional 1% goes for medical care. So the athletes are getting roughly 18% of the pie. The administrators and the coaches are getting 35% of the pie, and that needs to be changed. The way I would change it, rather than creating a labor market and turning people who are supposed to be students into employees, I would change it by providing additional resources for a proper education and providing medical support, not only while they're in college, but when they leave college, particularly for any injury that they have going forward that affects their earning capacity the rest of their lives. So that's a model, in my view, that would work much better, that would preserve what we love about college sports and would deal with some of the inequity that adheres to the present system.
Andy Zimbalist, again, a consultant, author, and sports economist with us on 365 Sports. Andy, on what is happening with streaming, and you know the story with the Pac-12, and they're trying to find a way to get themselves money per school and also visibility in some way to get their games on the air. Is that the future? Are they almost, if they were to go a lot or all streaming, is that ahead of its time and not quite people ready to handle that yet?
Well, so there's always a trade-off here, and the trade-off is the more you move to streaming, at least in 2023, the less exposure you have to the previous television audience that you had. And if you can manage to stay on ESPN, even if it ends up meaning that your total rights fees are a little bit lower, you get that much more exposure. And college sports does have to think about exposure. It's not automatic that people are going to want to watch Pac-12 games going forward. Look at even UCLA, which is now going to the Big Ten and a stronger school within the Pac-12. They've been getting 1/3 the size of crowds that they got 15 and 20 years ago, and so exposure is very important. But I think another question that needs to be addressed is how fans are going to react if the commercialization of the system and the monetization of the system continues apace. Will fans eventually start saying, well, this is looking more and more like minor league sports?
Mm-hmm.
The guys who are on the field are not really students anymore. What they are employees. And so insofar as college continues to move in an untrammeled fashion in that direction, what is the fans' gestalt going to be? Is it going to be, oh, I'm still just as interested in it? Or is it going to be, well, this is looking a lot like minor league baseball? And, of course, what happens in minor league baseball is instead of getting 30,000 people to the major league game, at the minor league level, if it's AAA, you might get 6,000 or 7,000. If it's AA, you might get 4,000 or 5,000. In single A, you might get 2,000 or 3,000. So I just think that there are so many issues now that college sports administrators have to pay attention to. But one of the key issues is, how are people experiencing your sport? How are they going to relate to the sport? How can you best continue to promote it in the long run?
Money is the driving force. Do you feel like that we've lost the innocence of college athletics, or is that still there?
Oh no, that's gone.
It's gone.
Okay. That was gone in 1852 when they had
right.
first rowing race in Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire.
Wow.
Throughout the 19th century, as college football started to become this massively popular thing, they were hiring tramp athletes, one school after another. And a tramp athlete was simply somebody who wasn't a student. You just paid them to come and play for your football team.
Mm-hmm.
That was happening throughout the 19th century. At the beginning of the 20th century, the NCAA tried to clean that up, but they didn't really succeed. And then it wasn't until 1956 that you started to introduce student scholarships. So instead of paying them under the table, now we were paying them indirectly over the table. But no, there's never been any purity. But if you're asking, is it getting dirtier and dirtier, I think the answer is yes.
Andy, we have so much more we'd love to hear from you on the Olympics and building stadiums into cities. Make money, lose money. Is it worth the trade-off? Love to get you on again in the future. I'll be in touch, and thank you so much for your time, your busy schedule.
Fun to talk to you guys. Take care.
Andy Zimbalist, sports economist and author of 20 books, and also a consultant and appreciate his time and getting his insight and views on many things, college and even professional and, of course, media sports.
Yeah, I think that we